guess. But if I just move the windows a bit, well then, okay, I guess we can start now. So basically, hello everybody, all two of you. Especially again, shout out to Loon for helping me test things, which of course was a Windows setting again and nothing else. I'm thinking of getting into streaming because mostly I can't get away from Souls games and I want to play them, but I've played them a lot and I've gotten a bit bored, especially in parts which are not that fun. Like, I know where every item is and stuff like that, so the exploration factor is gone, but I still kind of want to play them, and I figured like this might be a good opportunity to spice things up in the bedroom a bit, as people say. And if nobody watches, it doesn't really matter because I'm still playing the games and I've always liked talking. So maybe this is like the best of both worlds, right? I mean, everybody's doing it. All the cool kids and a lot of not so cool kids. So who knows how this turns out. For now, we're just going to see if the recording works in the end. For example, if I wanted to eventually make an actual let's play of this, if I could use the videos afterwards. And if, for example, I'm practicing something for a Mega Man Let's Play, like who has ever done these before, then I could use the stream recordings if something shows up eventually. Anyway, I don't know. Nowadays, everybody watches everyone do everything live. Even the worst bullshit gets watched, so maybe this is like the bullshit that people crave. I don't know. If it makes somebody happy, who am I to judge? It might make me happy. Not that I need it, I'm generally a very happy person. But whatever is fun, right? So I've noticed that the game sometimes stutters a bit, like the frame rate just isn't quite there, which might be due to the case that I'm also watching the stream at the same time. I'm also recording and, you know, I am streaming. But so far it's manageable. It might not be when we get to a more open area. Lord knows that the first DLC area, I'm really struggling showing that in my computer. Like, it slows down a lot and boots me out of the game very happily. And in more hardcore boss fights, this might not be a problem. Might also help because of slowdown. But we're just going to see. Maybe I will have to bump down the details even further. They're medium right now, and the resolution is 1280, as you do. But what's the setup for the visceral? Sometimes I get this, sometimes I don't. Generally, it's not the hardest thing in the universe, I think. Or R2s. Oh yeah, it's Simon. Hello, PS. So, reading the stream works. That's nice. This is a setup for the visceral. Yes! Haha! Didn't lose it. Oh yeah, I was fearing that. I can absolutely bump that down. Thank you for the comment. 2 viewers, but 3 people posting. Funny. Or maybe Loon has stopped watching, I can't blame him. Where is the audio? I never do these, of course, otherwise. I'm blind. Where's the fucking audio? Ah, where's the audio, of course. I think especially the sound effects need to get turned down. I tend to leave voice up because, I mean, I don't want to talk over NPCs anyway. So let's do it like this. I'm gonna hit a few walls. Less clicky, less clinky. Better now? Hopefully. I mean, it has been turned down, so it should be better, but is it good? That's the question. Ah, wonderful. Thank you very much for the comment, Socialized Medicine. Now please give me all the Twitch fun bucks for improving your viewing experience. Yeah, definite some frame rate issues going on here. Let's see how it works when I go to the open area, but I mean, this is not the quality I'm aiming for. Of course, it needs to be perfect in every way. I do admit it looks kind of nice, but I think I've set the game to low settings before, So I might just have to do that again. Again, as I said, fresh install of Windows and the game itself, so I didn't have any characters before. I need to make one. I'm going to transfer the old save files. I'm going to back it up at some point. But for now, this will have to do. It's a perfect opportunity to get into things again. Let's try lowering the quality in general. Maybe this works. Not medium, but low. I mean, who cares how things look, right? Right. Nobody cares. It's all about the gameplay. It's all about the combat. It's all about slashing enemies up. And let's go. I've never played a warrior before, a starting class. I've always been more of a cleric because I want to try everything out, and especially the faith ones because they have a cleric sacred chant. Okay, cool. Thanks for coinciding with my commentary. To try things out, or like I want to make a deck split, so obviously I have to be a thief. Well, very good parry, very good parry. Great. Should try this again. And so what I'm actually want to say is I don't know what the battle axe actually does. Yeah, Warcry, I figured as much, which I think changes the moveset. I want to heal this embarrassing mistake and heal up again. But this gives me the perfect opportunity to try out the Warcry. Right. This and a combo. This and so on. Oh, never played any Dark Souls. That is a rare case nowadays, but I cannot promise that I will make this into a regular feature or take into account your sensibilities when you're online or not. But for today I've planned, it's rather late, it's about midnight here in Germany, for at the maximum another hour or so, maybe finish up a bit of, maybe finish up the tutorial, I mean definitely finish up the tutorial, and then see what's going on later on. Is the Warcry still active? How long does this last? I mean, not that I'm complaining. If you would prefer I explain things, I wouldn't mind, because this gives me an opportunity to test out talking while playing. I mean, I'm not much of a live recorder. Ah, right, huh. Played a lot of Dark Souls 1, and jump is no longer on the same button as run, which is good. I prefer that, but I was just not used to it. This is why I fell. So anyway, for Pierce's sake, I'm going to explain what's going on a little bit. So we're walking around and we're hitting things with our weapons. Obviously, this is the tutorial which is meant to introduce us to these basic concepts like parrying and failing and such. And it's rather easy, as you can see, especially if you've played a lot of Souls before, which I have. But it does have some bite to it. As you could see, the enemies did take out some amount of health from me when I was getting careless, and this is basically the biggest lesson you can learn here, that you always have to be on your toes. And if you don't, even an experienced player like me can fuck up in various fun and interesting ways. Also, oh hey, 5 viewers by now, not bad at all. As you can see, the game rewards exploration, and sometimes together with a bit of platform, which always sucks, which is why I took a second try. Not at all related to me missing the button, but what the game is also about, apart from the exploration, is boss fights. I mean, it should be kind of obvious that this is what is awaiting us. The method, however, is not that obvious. I mean, we are freeing this guy from a terrible predicament, and how does he thank us? Becoming hostile. I mean, what is his problem? Ooh, that slow down. Ooh, that slow down. Anyway, let's try parrying here. I mean, terrible garbage at it apparently, but... What? What the fuck was that? Pretty sure I pressed the button. Nothing happened. Maybe he did not hit me, which is a prerequisite. Yeah, this is how it should go. Get fucked, man. Get fucked. Also, of course, amazing practice for his later incarnation. Spoilers, I guess. It will be a while though. Man, this is too slow. I have to look into fixing this a bit. I don't know how the video will come out, but I guess it's a learning opportunity for us all. Already. Oh no. Suck in his face. Whee! That shield is not good, which is why we're going to get rid of it and two-hand our weapon. Oh, yeah. I'm super not into how completely unpredictable this boss is. Like, I'm not seeing what he's winding up in terms of attacks. He has insane range. It's just like, he's really hard, man, but for kind of the wrong reasons. I gotta admit right now, I'm not the super biggest fan of... Wow, that was... for the finish. Perfectly planned, of course. I'm not the biggest fan of Dark Souls 3 in general. It's just, I have it installed, and I needed to make a new character anyway, I guess. For reasons like this, the bosses can be, as well as the enemies, twitchy in a bad way. Like, I don't see what's going on here at all. I don't feel in control in a way which I prefer to be. And this is a problem that the game sometimes has, not often. It's still a good game, but there might be some bitching in the future, I don't know. Anyway, something I've completely forgot. Guy's weak to fire. I should have found some fire bombs, but I didn't explore enough because I distracted myself talking. Now this is the issue. This is an issue. We're going to see. Maybe I won't miss this item. A broken straight sword. Amazing. Amazing. We need this. No, we don't. This is one of these typical Dark Souls traps. Like, if you charge into this guy, the other one will wake up and you're gonna get fucked. Yeah, it's super hard to see. Also, he has a terrible shield, and this is his downfall. Yeah, the frame rate tanked. It's this open area here, all the open areas, the game has kind of a problem with. I feel that it is a bit less optimized than it could be. I mean, it's also down to my laptop. It is getting old in years. It's 5 years now, at least, old. It has some problems. It takes an age to start up nowadays, which I think is due to the SSD, where Windows is on, having a problem in general. I mean, of course, when it's getting so old and you have a relatively new game like this here, Kiki? Oh, didn't kick. This is what I wanted to do. I always fuck that up. Then you can expect some performance issues. I mean, I'm quite happy that it runs as well as it does, and I'm also, well, kind of used to playing at these kind of frame rates because, as I said, the third DLC, which I rather recently took up playing, finished, didn't like it that much, but it has some moments which are good, some which are terrible. Something of a later thing to discuss, I guess. Goodbye. See you in hell, dog. So I'm kind of used to playing at these kind of frame rates and just making do because I wanted to see everything it had to offer, and it was mostly just when the camera is pointed at, look at all of this beautiful scenery here. Oh yeah, this beautiful scene in the foreground. Oh yeah, it's beautiful. Oh, look at these textures. Then you kind of have a bad time. But it's always been like this. I don't know how much the streaming itself actually affects that. I can't say. I can't say. Usually it stabilizes itself rather well. Like, after a few moments, it's like, oh, okay, I've loaded this area now, I guess. It should be okay. Should be okay. Can I not put the sword here before talking with her?
Welcome to the
Yeah, okay, who cares? This is definitely not a law through. I would never consider that unless I'm actually... Ah, there we go. Unless I'm actually making an LP. Yeah. But something to consider for the future, I guess. I was not going to talk to the NPCs or anything. This is just a test stream, and so far I'm pretty happy. I'm also happy that 5 people are watching. That's very nice. Hello, guys. And that most of the issues were actually rather minor, because this is really not what I'm used to. Now let's see here about plans for the character. Second. Hot tea. Oh, I was waiting for this message actually. Unsuitable for online play. Wonderful. Tends to do that very, very reliably in the second DLC, as I said, the very first area, terrible, like particle effects, wide open area. You cannot play. It's impossible for me, at the very least. Um, for now, it doesn't matter at all. I mean, sorry for all the would-be stream snipers that wanted to invade me. I guess I'm just gonna play offline for now. I also gotta say, it happened to me when the game was freshly installed. The computer was still chugging along rather nicely, and always in Firelink Shrine, less in other areas because there is just like this big area around us that is inexplicably loaded in. It has some issues. You can be incredibly magical. It's actually a good way to play. You can be a hybrid class of sorts by enchanting your weapon. I forgot you can't level on bonfires. Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 1. I played a lot of Dark Souls 1. Anyway, shut the fuck up. Here, I'm gonna show you the level up screen. Vigor does life. Endurance does the green bar, stamina, which is incredibly important to manage. By now I've played so many Dark Souls games that I don't have to have my eyes glued to it anymore. I kind of got a feel for how often I can slash until I have to stop because I still want to roll away. But it is one of the most important things to have in the game. Vitality is how much you can... Vitality. German going through, is how much you can carry on your person, which is important if you want to equip some of the heavier armors in the game without serious penalty. Strength and dexterity are your make smash good and be elegant while slashing up foes stats, which makes the weapons do more damage, and also be able to carry them at all in some cases. And here are the good stuff, the casting stats. I'm not going to do that for now. I mean, depending on how often I stream, maybe I will pick up my Pyromancer character and can show people how that works. Generally, this is just two schools of magic which you have. It's called Sorcery for Intelligence and Faith Miracles, which basically you require some kind of catalyst for that, either a rod, like Harry Potter stuff, or a chime, or what's the other thing? Whatever. And with these you can cast Miracles of the Gods, which is healing stuff, and also lightning. It's basically just the kind of spells available to you, and there is also stuff that scales with both at the same time, which would be Pyromancy in this game's case, and also stuff like Dark Sorceries and Miracles. Depending on the catalysts can also be important. But generally, if you want to be a caster, you put 60 points into this, after which it stops scaling and you can use all of the spells which you want. And you put a tiny little bit in vigor and nothing in strength and other stuff, and then you just be a glass cannon. I don't know, I gotta confess, I'm kind of nerdy, but not nerdy enough to be very much into D&D. I'm sorry. No, I know generally what you're talking about, I think. It's a bit arcane and holy, yes. Faith is the cleric stuff, and intelligence is the scholar type stuff. And you got some mixing depending on the game and depending on generally the kind of lore that is attached to that. I don't care too much for that. Just mechanically, this is soul arrows and trickier stuff like making your body invisible. This is healing and lightning sometimes, but mostly about healing and utility and stuff. And if you want to do damage, it tends to be a little harder with faith, and you have to invest a bit more into tactics and stuff, while intelligence is just the pew pew stat basically. For this character, however, because I want, if I'm going to stream, I don't want to have the game give me a hard time, and I've actually never done this particular build before, much to my chagrin, because it's what I like to play, is just put stuff into strength. Like, this is very simple. This is probably the easiest way to play Dark Souls 3, is just have a big club and smash things. At least that's what people say. What I'm going to do for the first levels is just a bit in Vitality, because that's kind of the fashion stat. Armor doesn't really matter too much in this game, but I like wearing heavier armor just for how it looks. And the more Vitality you have, your heavier armor you can wear without being penalized, basically. And that's all it does. So I'm gonna put a little bit of that into there to not have to think about it anymore. And that's basically what we're going to do for the start. And yeah, let's smash. Now the very first boss is going to give us a weapon which is very nice for smashing. I intend to just use that. Usually I'm the kind of guy who's very ADD with these kind of games. Is like, I'm going to make a dex build and use a dex weapon like this saber. But now I've found a scythe, which is kind of rare and I've never used before because I've never played a dex build. So I'm going to play a scythe now. And then it turns out that the scythe is terrible ass garbage. But then I find a better scythe. Maybe that is funny. And then it's like, oh, but this scythe also scales with intelligence. Maybe I should branch out a little. And it's like, no, no, Simon, no. Just make a character that has high health, high endurance, and high of your main stat, and you're going to be fine. Usually I get through these games okay enough anyway, but I always feel like I'm gimping myself by not focusing on a build. It's not a terrible big deal, but sometimes I get stuck on bosses in a very stupid way, even though I've played this game quite a lot. Then I'm like, maybe it's because you have only put 20 points in Vigor, when every sane person puts 40 points into that immediately because they don't want to die in 2 hits. Fucking garbage, moron. But yeah, that's just the way it is. Um, I'm not sure how to approach this, like explore everything. Like spoilers, this way here is a dead end, but you can get upgrade materials and stuff, or just push through. But actually, I think I'm going to go with the just push through option, for the simple fact that this is a stream. And I guess I have to adjust a little bit to not just, waffle about. I mean, I've spent too much time on the stage screen anyway. And to just get to what I want to have in a bit more timely manner. What am I actually doing with this fucking shield? I'm not going to use it anyway. I'm going to two-hand and smash, so let's get used to that immediately. Where is the other one? There is the other one. As you can see, I've memorized every single enemy in these games already. I wanted to do a jump attack, but it worked out anyway. Yes, I can use intellect to energize magic weapon. The way it works is that you basically put a buff onto your weapon which makes it also do magical damage. And usually how this works is that you have to have a certain base level of intelligence to cast the buff you want. These are called, for example, magic weapon. And magic weapon, I think in this game takes like 10 intelligence, so I could cast it in one single level of 3 fire bombs, that's nice. In one single level of intelligence invested. But greater magic weapon takes like 15 or 18 or something like that. And don't take much damage, huh? Okay, fine with that. And that gives you a bigger buff, but it doesn't scale with intelligence. Like, it always just adds this is where I came from. What am I doing? It always just adds like 30 extra magical damage, or it's just numbers I invented just now. 30 magical. Oh, this is not the Dark Souls 1 method, right? 30 magical damage for normal magic weapon, and like 45 for greater magic weapon, and there is eventual crystal magic weapon. Crystal is always the biggest and baddest stuff in Dark Souls. Casting, and that then gives you 60 extra damage. I don't know. And also some extra scaling or whatever. But usually it's just like the intelligence itself. You only have to raise it to the base level and then you can use that shit. And anything other than that you don't really have to do. Hello. Hi. Should have run probably. I don't know. I usually do it like this. Just let it roast these guys up here. And then I kind of push through once more, please. I think this here is okay. This vantage point. And then I just hurt a lot. It's terrible. My feelings. Ah, so hot. Oh, much like me. And that's it. It's not a very well thought out trap in my opinion. It's like it evokes the memory of the Dragon Bridge from Dark Souls 1, which is also kinda bad and a bit janky to entice the dragon to do stuff you want, but in this case you can't just run through, so it kind of loses a bit of its mighty mark. I don't know, I mean the first time it's effective, you piss your pants with this thing, it's fine, but afterwards it's just like, whatever. Want to see another holy shit moment? Oh my god! Oh my god! And this is Dark Souls. Just wanted to have another drink of my tea. close the lid on this episode. There are ways you can see this coming, of course, but I think everybody, even very experienced Dark Souls players, gets kind of tricked by the very first chest in the game being a mimic. Um, I think it's funny. I know that a lot of people are like, yeah, I mean, Dark Souls 3 is a bit too into the idea of being a Dark Souls game, in the sense that it says, like, obviously we have to have these traps, and they have to be really cruel to the player, ha ha ha, and I mean, I get where people are coming from with that. Um, I still laughed when the Mimic ate me the first time. I was like, okay, well played, I really didn't see that one coming. I'm actually going to use a shield for this, just because it's useful and dogs suck. Oh, my rage. I mean, why not use everything the game offers you, right? Instantly turns into a sniper and just headshots every enemy. Where is the X guy? I think he is coming from downstairs? Maybe? Maybe? Where is the X guy? Hello, X guy. Fuck you. Also give me a weapon, if possible. That would be fun. Oh, 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 oh. Oh. Well, I mean, I'll take it. That was a charge down attack you barely could avoid. I mean, I tried. And I failed. Obviously bad game design. Nah, but it's also a kind of I knew that the dog was still here. A kind of thing which I don't like that much about Dark Souls 3 in particular, that the enemies tend to be really aggressive in ways which I'm not super into. Like, I mean, this dog, for example, it's not so much fun to fight, especially as there is no real poison like in Dark Souls 1. I mean, maybe I just have to readjust from like, he followed me down, how rude. Come here, you. Come here, you. I want to not fight you on the stairs because stairs are awful. I'll read your comment in a second, Pierce. Ah, beautiful, beautiful. Less platform in Momodora. Yeah, actually, I played Momodora recently. The first one. No, not the first. The fourth one. Reverie Under the Moonlight, I think it's called, if I pronounce that correctly at all. Because I saw the first three in Let's Play form and I thought they looked pretty nice and they were progressively getting better. And so I decided to, yeah, it's a good idea to play this game for myself and not watch the fourth Let's Play. Surprise, motherfuckers! Okay, let's see here. This one is like Judex Guldur at the start, who turns into a fuck-off monster again. And this is how it's supposed to go. If you prepare a bit and look around, you use your fire bombs to light him up. Because when he's lit up, he gets stunned from all the fire and maybe it doesn't work. Okay, that's also fine, I guess, because he has been stunned recently. Maybe. I'll just throw another one. And it's not enough, of course I'm gonna die. Nope, I didn't die. I hate this guy. It's such a hassle to fight if you don't light him up with fire bombs. And it's not guaranteed, of course, that you have fire bombs, because I only have one more left, as you can see, and that might be... If I die now, you know, then I still have only one more left, so... Unfun. And that guy could have killed me at any point. Like, he has some really nasty attacks which are very hard to see coming. And this is why by now I usually tend to not go into this direction, because the only thing you get is a Titanite shard and an Ember. If you let him transform, you could have stopped that. But it's just not worth it, in my opinion. It's not fun. And if you don't need the longbow, and I don't, I think, you could chase away the dragon within the span of like 2 hours of shooting. Certainly not with all these 10 or so arrows which I got, but it's really not worth it. Anyway, back to Momodora. It's definitely about dodging and you don't have that much health, you really should avoid getting hit in any Dark Souls game. And this is also something that Dark Souls 3 fails a bit in my opinion, because some of these attacks are really fucking hard and annoying to avoid. They basically are supposed to, more or less, to just roll spam. It's like you roll and you roll and you roll, and you can do this really easily in Dark Souls 3. Like, it's crazy how easy this is, especially coming from a lot of playing Dark Souls 1. And it's it's a bit overboard, I think. It's just that it went too much into the action
Well,
direction.
I thought
This
you
is just my
let
personal
me
feelings
spy on
about
it.
the stuff. Again, this is not a bad game. It's not an indictment of saying this is like terrible and garbage and I don't like playing it. You always have to kind of affirm that when it comes to the Dark Souls community, because even the slightest slight against this game is just like, no, it's perfect. It's exactly how it has to be. And like, you can still not like it, man. I don't know. Anyway, Shrine Maiden here, I just glossed over this at the start, but I think it was kind of a good time to get into buying stuff. And I think I'm actually going to buy this, so I can one-hand it, which I have never done before because I like parrying, but it feels wrong for this kind of character. So we're going to use a shield that has as weapon skill not the parry, but instead usually you have to two-hand your weapon to do this Warcry thing, which changes as shown before your moveset, but with this shield active you don't have to two-hand, you can do it one-handed. And do this. Smashy smash. And back to the high wall. Another thing in the Momodora comparison, just because nobody else has said anything, if you platform in Dark Souls, then it's always bad. So ideally, you shouldn't platform at all. And whenever the game forces you to do something, it's really good. Gameplay style that gives you the most advantage. There are some gameplay styles that are easier for the general player versus environment content. There are some which are a bit cookie cutter. I would say sword and board, or axe and board, I guess, like I'm doing right now. You can finish the game with that. You just block stuff, and when it bounces off your shield, you hit it. And if you don't know an area yet, like here, you just run around with your shield up. You're like, oh, there is this guy coming. Fortunately, I have my shield up. It's not a good shield. It doesn't block 100%. Bear with me. And then you counter him basically. Like you just go here, and there is this guy, and then you rush him down. You just hit him a bunch, and then there is another guy. I mean, by now I know that there is another guy coming, and I just shield up like a pussy. Maybe run around him a bit, and then I hit him and he dies. And there is another guy, and I held the shield up, and then he hits me and he bounces off the shield, and then I hit him and he dies. And this works. This just works. It's not terribly exciting or interesting to play in my opinion, but this is exactly what I did the first time I played Dark Souls 1. I eventually upgraded to bigger shields and bigger weapons, got kind of fondness for big weapons, and it got me through the game eventually. But after you play a bit more, you start to realize that, especially in Dark Souls 3, aggression is really the name of the game. Where you just want to rush in and own some fuckers. Like this guy here. You two-hand your weapon, then it doesn't bounce off his shield, and then you just start hitting him. Like, it works so easily because you have so much stamina, and rolling doesn't take off much stamina at all. And you don't have to be careful, you don't have to hang back here. You don't have to be like, oh my god, he's going to fire an arrow at me, I should stay here with my shield up and never move. It's just, you don't have to. It's completely pointless. Just go. I think this is a mistake. I'm going to wait for another cycle for breathing. Do that. So yeah, and once you realize that this might be actually a good idea to just, get into things, then you can do stuff like I'm planning to do and get a big smashy weapon eventually. And just two-hand it, don't use the shield at all, maybe for some passive bonuses, maybe not, and just start hitting things, just start murdering. This works also rather well. You can play as a sorcerer. and sorcerers have decided advantages in that they have a very reliable way of dealing range damage. I mean, you do have a mana bar, as you can see, the blue one here, but you can refill that in Dark Souls 3 really easily. It should not be an issue in the slightest to get your mana up and running, so that you can go through an area constantly and only fire magic bolts, and it's going to serve you quite well. You can easily cheese it out of the game. This is also boring, in my opinion, but it can be quite cathartic if you've been struggling before in the game. What I'm doing right now is letting this guy pass because this is now a stealth game. I don't feel like dealing with him right now because he's a complete and utter asshole. I can probably take him by now, but I'm playing it a bit safe just in the name of not having to redo the previous section. I'm thinking of you guys. All three of you. And yeah, you basically then, again for the Dark Souls not knower, you go from bonfire to bonfire, constantly in fear of your life, ideally exhausting all of your resources, completely out of Estus. There is this fucking knight, you really don't want to deal with him. You run by him, he almost kills you, and then you finally reach this rescuing bonfire and you feel a great rush of relief, and you're really happy that this adrenaline has been properly applied to you and your body, and everything is dandelions. So anyway, there is this guy. Don't forget about this guy. Let's smash him. And I couldn't smash him because I have no poise in this game. Another problem with Dark Souls 3, I mean, that has been discussed to death, but every little bite of a dog, every little swing of a broken dagger will stagger you out of your attack animations unless certain terms and conditions apply, which we're going to come to later on. And that can be really frustrating, especially if the enemy attacks quicker than you do, because you have to dodge around them, and then you have to be very careful when you swing, and you always have to be careful when you swing in Dark Souls, don't get me wrong, but especially with the slower weapons, which are not quite as smashy as they could be, you run into this problem that you are just barely too slow to hit the enemy, but you also don't really deal enough damage to warrant the slowness, so you're kind of in this weird stuck in between place where you don't have fun playing the game, basically, in very bad ways. Put it very broadly. Well, this went smooth. You can see that the smashy part is working out just fine. The thing is, it applies to the enemy, so in general it is fair, and this is exactly what I did to this guy. I didn't let him hit me because I hit him first. But this only works if the weapon is fast enough, which with this one is. If I had like a greatsword type weapon, which is a little slower, deals a little more damage, yes, but with this it wouldn't have worked. And this is a bit of a problem. It's also why I don't like great swords that much, especially in this game. I mean, they're kind of boring in general, in my opinion, because they're just swords, and there is so much more you can do. But especially in Dark Souls 3, they're in this weird place. Just purely talking PvE, I know that they're good in PvP, where they're just barely slow enough to not hit the enemies quick enough, and they don't deal enough damage to really make up for that. Whereas if you have a very, very big hammer thing that can easily overpower the enemies and swing through their hits regardless, because they're specifically coded to do that, and only those. And yeah, not an ideal situation in general. Whereas in Dark Souls 2, it has hit a very sweet spot in the kind of balancing way where you can... Oh, I think I always forget this item now that I do actually look around for it. It doesn't really matter, as you can see. Where if you have higher armor, then you will be able to withstand more hits before they stagger you out of them. And then you just push through, trade hits, and that should be an okay playstyle to do. I mean, it's not ideal because you do get hit, but sometimes, you know, you do get hit. You can't avoid every hit. And Dark Souls 3, it kind of likes you dodging around. It makes your dodge really good. And no, you don't. This guy would have transformed too if I didn't stop him, but I don't want to deal with this right now. Where was I? With the dodge? Yeah, Dark Souls 3 really wants you to dodge things, and hello. Hello, Crystal Lizard. I killed your big brother in the tutorial. Now you gave me a Roger. He would have run away if I didn't know exactly where he was and stopped him from running. Yeah, the dodging is good. It's cool to dodge around things. The game just over relies on telling you you really should dodge this and or block it with a big shield, but the intermediate playstyle, it's not really supported. It's all or nothing, I think. Oh yeah, I kind of forgot about this guy. Sometimes shields are useful for ranged enemies, but actually, I'm just gonna fuck him up. There is more guys coming. Yes, of course. There's another guy coming. Ah, good trap, very good trap. Another guy coming. Hilarious. Fuck you. Oh, I didn't even kill him. I do know the game exactly, that is true, and this is why I can just run into things, that is also true. It's not an approach that is feasible for a first-time player, I do think, yes. Though, let's take a look at this room, for example. It looks like there is some kind of fuckery going on, and then you can see this guy approach. Okay, he's got a big shield, he's got a spear, and then you take a look around. Is something going to come from here? Doesn't look like it. Okay. Has he seen me? No. Okay, now how do we approach this? I can either go in here with a shield up and be careful and look at his attacks, or I can storm in. You probably should get a handle on how he works first, but this was very telegraphed, for example. This here also I knew what he's going to do, but now circling around him, for example, doesn't work. I found that out. Okay, so what do we do? Shield up doesn't work quite well because he can't block me. Maybe I hit him. Okay, I hit him. And there we can see already, I staggered him with my hit and made him lose his attack, which is exactly what I want to happen, of course. And so we've already learned that going into the attack is probably a good idea. Still trying to see if the war cry is going to be useful for me, I don't know. And this is how we learn an enemy, basically. This is what you want to do at the start. It's not the ideal enemy to show this, I think, because he's a bitch. No, actually, you're the first one who said that. Thank you, Regulin Pair. And, but in general, this is how you can approach the game, where you just basically take your time at the very first, learn enemies' moves, and once you learn the enemies' moves, then you can go in. You can also try to rush things at start, but it's really not recommendable. It's really not recommendable. At first you should go slow, maybe use the shield just to see what the enemy does, and then once you figure that out, then you can start going in. So, yeah, of course, Dark Souls, traps. I forgot about this guy. But you can react to this kind of traps, as you can see. I was basically just dancing around him a bit, and that is fine. Ah, the broadsword. One of the best weapons in the game, believe it or not. One thing I've always enjoyed about Dark Souls is that basically every weapon is feasible, which is not 100% true for Dark Souls 3. Another point against its favor. But, a second. Tea's cold. Oh well. Was a big mug anyway. Didn't lose much. But, lost my train of thought. What's to happen? I forgot what I was saying. Something about Dark Souls 3. Ah, yeah, right. Not all the weapons are useful. Dark Souls 3 has a shitload of weapons. Some of them fun, some of them basic but usable, and sometimes the fun does not directly translate into is actually good. And that happens more often than not. And I kind of resent it for one specific reason, and that is Dark Souls 2 exists. And I really like Dark Souls 2, especially for the weapon variety, where you basically can use whatever the fuck you want, especially if it looks goofy and offbeat. It's probably going to actually be good and fun to use. And there are quite a lot of weapons in Dark Souls 3 where this does not work at all. This is actually very, very definitely the last Dark Souls, unless they cave to some weird we need a sequel demand. because the entire lore of this game, if I actually bothered to watch the movies at the start, is the world is ending, everything is dying. This is probably the very last cycle of rebirth, which is something of a theme in Dark Souls, which this world can support. And it's basically just a gigantic metaphor for, please, we do not want to make Dark Souls games forever. It's been fun, but we should move on, and you as a player and a fan base in general should also do exactly the same, because this shit has to stop, man. Which is a commendable message, I think. Maybe sometimes they beat you a bit too over the head with it, but in general, to answer your question, there will not. I think some guy down there just walked into a fire. There will not be a fourth Dark Souls. I can recommend you getting into Dark Souls because it's really fun. I mean, I wouldn't do this if it weren't. Um, can be a bit hard to get into, of course. I mean, the series have a bit of a reputation for that. Oh, I wanted to throw a throwing knife. Whoops. Oh well, I don't have any Estus then. Doesn't really matter too much. I will probably die against this guy, but we can get back here easily. I actually wanted to do this for this specific reason. Thank you. Let's try this. Maybe. Yep. Well, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Should work around, play around more with the stun, which the Warcry does. I mean, now of course I don't have any FP mana left anymore, but whatever. Yeah. So getting into Dark Souls, it can be really tough at the start. It can be really demanding, and you will die a lot. But this is part of the charm. Um, I recommend actually starting with Dark Souls 1. For the very first tutorial in Dark Souls 1 is quite gentle in comparison to what we had to do here. Like that very first boss here, if you're a completely new player, it will fuck you up. It's not fun to deal with, especially in his second phase. And the speed can be overwhelming, while it still has the Dark Souls trappings of you really want to be careful, mate. And as I said, can be a bit hard to adjust to. Dark Souls 1 is very rough around the edges in some points, so I cannot recommend it fully just to just play Dark Souls 1 because it's the perfect paragon of game design or anything. But you will realize after the first real boss of Dark Souls 1 um, if you like it or not, basically. And that is what you should aspire to. You should try to give the games a fair chance, more or less. Give it a little more of a chance, which you might think it deserves, maybe. Especially if you get really frustrated at the start. It's like, what the fuck is this bullshit? Like, it's not as bullshit as you might think. Maybe this is not. Oh fuck yeah. Okay, he didn't get stunned as much as I thought. It doesn't matter too much. But with some games, you know, you say after half an hour, this is garbage and I don't want to play it anymore, and it's not something I will ever like, I'm pretty sure. With Dark Souls, it's a bit different because it really hates you. It feels like it really hates you, but at some point you begin to appreciate how well it crafts its hatred, basically. That it's not an unfair kind of hatred. It's I really want you to have fun with this, but on my terms kind of hatred. So it respects you in ways that other games do not, by disrespecting you, if that makes sense. And it can be a tough lesson to learn, and it's not for everyone. For sure. As I said just now, I don't like that some people are like, no, this is the perfect games. Um, it has a rude sense of humor. That is actually a very, very good way of putting it. You can hear the guy on top waking up at the moment, by the way. This is what happens if you let him. I mean, we're not seeing it, but yeah. Rude sense of humor is really good. Jesus, I really thought this was going to be a backstab. This guy is a little too twitchy for my taste. Oh, I really like the traps. I had the idea, and I mean, if this works out in general, then maybe it will turn into something, because I really wouldn't want to practice for ages without someone watching me do it, because, yeah, that would be tedious as hell. But I was thinking of making a Dark Souls 1 Let's Play that is basically triggering all the traps edition. because many Let's Plays of experienced players like myself, in this case, we know where everything is. I mean, I didn't know this guy, but mostly we do know everything. And I think it would be fun to play the game like a first timer, and even worse than a first timer, like someone who is not quite as observant, and to basically point out all the myriads of ways in which the game is perfectly willing to fuck you over for not paying attention, and also sometimes just for fun, basically. And oh, I forgot that there are exploding barrels, or I don't think I actually knew that. Well, there we go. Another lesson learned. Dark Souls never ceases to surprise you. I like that too. Um, and basically to point out all the ways in which the game design was actually fair here, and or to say that okay, yeah, this was a bit of a prank from the game, yeah. Of course it would be like my Mega Man Let's Plays, because I really, really like the analyzation thing. I mean, I should be. I'm a scientist by trade. I don't think that people are aware of this because I don't think I've ever mentioned it, but you know, these streams things tend to be a bit more personal with the personality of the people, and why not mention it? I haven't Let's Played in a while because I was finishing up my PhD in chemistry. Done with that now, so we have a doctor here. German doctor, of course, and not that I want to let it get to my head, but this is basically why I've been busy a lot, and I wanted to do it at the side as a hobby, but it can be just time demanding, and also I got married in the meantime. All of these small things, which oh yeah, this is the actual trap of this room. Forgot about that too. See, this is how they get you. And yeah, I would overanalyze the shit out of this because one thing that drew me to Dark Souls in general at the very first step is that I thought it's basically people have called me an idiot for saying this before. I think they're kind of similar to the Mega Man games in various ways, and the most important thing is actually enemy placement in comparison to how the level works. Because there's always these are the two factors that play into a level being like it is. Yeah, it's big, so some awesome big things, and I'm really happy with how everything turned out. Um, um, yeah, but yeah, things that work together is like this platform here is raised, and you can see the enemies below doing their thing, and then you can plan your approach. You can do that in many Mega Man rooms, but there are also other rooms in Mega Man where you just get dropped into a situation and it's like, okay, you have 2 seconds to do something about that. And there is also, thank you, an in-level difficulty curve where basically they introduce a gimmick on a safe platform to you, and then they want you to work with the gimmick, and then they want to work you against the gimmick basically, and then they utilize the gimmick in a creative way. This is basically for me the ideal archetype for platformer level. And you can think about these souls levels in the same kind of design, where you basically introduce a gimmick. Here it is. Oh, idiot. You introduce a gimmick and then you play around with the gimmick. And after the first introduction, the game expects you to know what you're doing with the gimmick. With the one caveat that sometimes the first introduction is already liable to kill you. That's just something which is uniquely Dark Souls, I guess. But many cases it is still fair in the sense that you could have seen it coming, and also, very importantly, um, usually it's not an instant kill. I mean, if an enemy jumps at you from this doorway like the one did before, if it hits me, I'm not dead. I get hurt, and this is a drain on my resources, of course, and eventually will run out of my orange sippy stuff. And I might not make it to the next bonfire, but it's not a spike, It's not like saying, okay, you need to nail this jump over the weird platform mechanics we designed for you. This time it bounces, and if you fuck this jump up the first time, then you fall into the spike and you're dead, and you didn't have an opportunity to learn the platform. Dark Souls is a rough teacher. It is perfectly willing to let you take damage, and yes, sometimes it will kill you. Of course it will. It's not perfect in that sense. But usually it is very, very good at towing the line between being just unrepentant bullshit and being too hand-holdy. And that is all something which I've recognized very quickly when starting and playing Dark Souls 1, where I see that every single enemy is placed very, very deliberately. Um, um, the role is quintessential to Dark Souls in a way that the slide is not to Mega Man. You cannot think of Dark Souls without the role mechanic. It's completely impossible because it is what enables you to play the game in a manner that is actually fun, other than just hiding behind your shield and turtling. And it is also something that is downright required to finish the game in ways that the slide is not. Um, I mean, you have a slide-only passage where you can only pass through with the slide. Okay, yeah, granted. But especially in Mega Man 3, many of the bosses, they don't require you to slide per se. They're like, okay, it's good that you can slide. We can make the bosses a little faster, but I mean, it would be fun if Roll actually did more. But it's rarely integral to the design in general, whereas to the enemy design, especially the enemy design. Whereas in Dark Souls, if you don't roll, you're gonna have a really, really bad time, and it really expects you to learn that at some point. Though it doesn't like tell you, it doesn't say like, okay, now here is a swinging blade, dodge under it, and the swinging blade is actually padded, so it will just hit you back, and you cannot pass the swingy blade, or I mean, log of padded wood, I guess, until you've mastered the art of roll invincibility frames. That is something that Dark Souls will never do. It will just give you an enemy, and it will tell you, by the way, this button is roll, and then it expects you to figure out that probably you should be using the roll to avoid the enemy. This is perfectly fair, but then there are nuances which the game never tells you about, and there I can understand if someone says it's too obscure for him. I get that, and there are many mechanics in Dark Souls where I feel that it would be best if they could actually explain themselves a little bit more. Like, for example, the role, as I said, having invincibility frames at all. This is not something that is natural. I mean, in many games you would use the roll to get out of the way, and this is exactly what you would do in Mega Man. Whereas in Dark Souls you can roll through attacks, like literally through the enemy's sword as it's hitting you, and that is not something that would ever work in Mega Man. You will get hit with your body. You don't get any courtesy invincibility frames or anything. By the way, we're back at the start. Level design. Um, which is more in line with, for example, a CX Metroidvania, of course. But this is also something, a big comparison of the Dark Souls games. I would almost call them a bit like Metroidvanias in the exploration sense. It's not like you get more abilities to progress, which you need. You do get keys, yes. Um, and you don't need to have some platforming challenges, which you might or might fail at. Hello. There's some enemy that is chasing me right now, but I don't actually see him because it's probably stuck at the wall, and while he's chasing me, I can't use the bonfire. A little annoying. Where are you? Who hates me? This guy, of course. Yeah, but he should be far away. No? Yes, thank you. Um, yeah, Metroidvania about it's about the exploration, about hiding stuff in nooks and crannies, and having this large world for you to explore, where which is actually kind of small because it's still a video game, but it feels big, but it loops back onto itself. So you have a map which you can explore and get lost in, like really lost in, and feel this sense of isolation. I'm not super into the idea of this atmosphere stuff. You know, I mean, I let's not say atmosphere because I like atmosphere. I'm not into the idea of the story being crucially important, of the graphics being something really, really necessary to the experience. But actually, the atmosphere, that is something that I can feel, even though I'm not a very visceral player most of the time. Uh, you know, what with the analyzing stuff. Um, but it is something which does affect me, and I appreciate that. And even though you are that is the brilliance of it, is that you can get lost in a large map. You can be like, man, I've walked miles through these corridors. I'll get to your question in a second, by the way, I read it. But eventually you get this elevator and then you're back at the start and it's like this sense of relief, like
Welcome
I can
home,
get
sweet
back to
Grandpa.
this. You have a half an hour of ever-growing dread where you're like, oh my god, I am so completely out of my depth here and in some depths, deep shit. Um, and it builds up and it builds up, and then you see that bonfire, and it's just like hallelujah choir sounding, or you get this elevator and you're like, this is it, this is the shortcut, and then you open the door, which you saw at the very start can only open for one side, and yeah, and then you have this sense of relief. So to get back to the chat in a second, I need to figure something better. First of all, you should sleep. Sleep is healthy. Thank you too for your praise. I really appreciate it. And maybe I can do some kind of revival with this. I don't know. It might be fun. I'm having a lot of fun at the very least.
Very well.
And
Then
I wish
touch
you
the
good night.
darkness
Thank you very
within
much,
me. Take
Pear.
nourishment from these sovereign.
And Pierce, to answer your question, I played Summon's Returns. I liked it. I think it could have been a bit better. Just it was very slightly disappointing in ways which I cannot
Farewell,
completely put
native
into
land.
words. Maybe a little bit too safe, maybe a little bit too samey in terms of enemies designs. I mean, that is a common complaint. I know that. It's not, I didn't invent this. But that is definitely something which
Well
I
spotted.
felt just,
Very
it's
well.
like, okay,
Then
I
touch.
feel like I've done this before by now in after the 20th enemy, which fights exactly the same. And
Farewell,
that was
Ashley.
kind of boring in stretches in the middle. But overall, I liked playing the game. I immediately start another playthrough on hard mode. I finished that. Second one was far easier than the first. It's just like Dark Souls, I guess. And that was, in general, it was fun. It's a good game. I didn't I bought it on release because I wanted to. I actually I don't like doing this at all. Like I'm super anti this. You have to support, you have to vote with your wallet and stuff. I like buying games used, but in this case I actually felt like I want to play it right now, and it might have the positive effect of showing, yeah, you know, somebody is buying this on release basically without knowing much about it, and just trusting us to make a good Metroid again by a little bit of word of mouth, and maybe we should make more good Metroids then, and it was a good Metroid. It's not the best Metroid, but it was very enjoyable, um, with some boring stretches. And that's all you can really ask for. I got my money's worth, even on the full price. And oh, it's actually the wrong bonfire. Whoops, sorry about that. Lets me talk a bit more, but yeah, was fun. Um, I skipped over a few things in exploring, but what I'm actually going to do now is run to the boss, kill the boss, get his soul, which we're going to make into a weapon relatively shortly afterwards, but not today. Once I've killed the boss, and hopefully first try, we will see. Man, it's taking a lot of time to load. Then I'm going to stop too because it's 10 to 1 a.m. here. And I also should get some sleep. So, travel to the correct bonfire. And yeah, because the shortcut is to the first bonfire. Yes, in a way. It's all about souls. The currency you absorb from enemies are souls. But the Dark Soul is actually a special kind of soul. Um, and it is, I mean, I could be getting this wrong, and some lore people are actually yelling at me right now. I can feel it in my brain. The Dark Soul is humanity, which is actually legally distinct trademark from souls, in the sense that everything has souls, especially the demons. They are basically comprised of souls, and the bosses, I mean. And but humans have that very, very special kind of connection, kind of thing in them, which they basically stole for themselves, to be different, to rise above empty soul. Wow, this is terrible. What the fuck just happened? Just because I needed these throwing knives, apparently. Oh well. And this humanity is a thing that defines humans now, which have both souls and humanity in them, and they're kind of battling for prevalence. And if you only have souls, then you turn into a demon, and if you only have humanity, then you turn to something even worse. And you kind of have to have the balance of this. And the dark soul, that is the manifestation of humanity thingy, and the theme of the game, basically. It's not something you can look for, you can search for, but I personally have interpreted that for myself as before the humans there were only the gods, I think, and then when the humans came up, when they made themselves into humans by stealing the dark soul, the humanity for themselves, the bosses, the gods gave that phenomenon, that for them completely unknown phenomenon of humanity, a name which they could understand, the dark soul. But it's not a soul. They just didn't get that. They didn't realize that this is not something which they can put into soul terms, but they still named it a soul anyway. I think this is kind of what that interpretation is. Um, but I mean, generally you can also interpret it as these games are dark fantasy, and and you collect souls in them. Just very, very basic. I mean, a name can mean more than one thing, of course. The dude who praises the sun. Funny story about that. We might fight him as a boss later on. Nah, I know it's not true. He's an NPC in Dark Souls 1, and a very fun NPC who is introducing you to the game's co-op system. He also calls it Jolly Cooperation, which is also a very, very fun thing to say, of course. He's just a very nice dude and a very well-rounded character in general in a game that often has people that are just very vague and sitting around. He actually follows you through the game more or less, shows up in very many different places, and yeah, he searches for his personal son and he praises the sun. And he's a good dude and everybody likes him. In this game we find some remnants of him, basically, some items that recall him and his memory, but yeah, this is basically, he's not in this game. He personally is not in this game. Yeah, meet the first boss, Vordt of the Boreal Valley. He has a club. We're going to acquire this club. We're going to use this club. Maybe at some point, if I ever stream again. But so far it looks like I might, because as I said, it's fun. And I mean, I have 4 viewers, which I'm entertaining. That is great. That is fun. And before I get the club, I have to get his soul, and then I have to get a way to make the soul into a club. But we're getting there. We're getting there. He's not a hard boss. I still struggle against him the first time because I always struggle in these games. Like, I'm not a Dark Souls savant at all. I really have to know for a while what I'm doing. But the trick with Vordt is basically he works like many Dark Souls bosses should work. Like many people expect Dark Souls bosses to work, and that is you basically stay in his ass and never leave it. And he doesn't really have a very good way of unassing you from his ass. Oh. I didn't know that you could hit me like that. Like, yeah, he hit me a bit here, but if you stay just behind and also roll behind... Oh, I didn't want to hit the second one. The lag is killing me right now! Whee! That should have been my death, but it wasn't. Yeah. So, yeah, stay in his ass, basically. Stay in his ass. You should be safe. And when he does something that looks like it might hit you even though you are in his ass, then, yeah, like this, then you roll. You might have seen me roll through his club. That's the king's tactic, of course. This is what you have to do to succeed. And would you know it, I actually did it, the absolute madman. You can poison souls yourself. You can poison foes yourself. You can also frostbite them, exactly what he did. That's also a fun thing about Dark Souls. Most of the things that enemies do to you, you can do to the enemy yourself. I mean, I can literally get his weapon, and his weapon will do the frostbite effect. And that is something which I'm aiming for. I only need to kill one more boss later on, which I can do as my next boss, and get the ability to make boss souls into boss weapons, and then I can use the boss weapons, and it's really fun. Which is something I really, really like about Dark Souls 2, is trying out different weapons and playing around with them and using a weapon you've never used before. I mean, I've never used this axe. It's basic from the hitting standpoint, but the war cry, which stuns enemies, if you utilize this well, can be effective. I've only utilized it once by now because, you know, just hitting things is usually a bit easier. But especially true for the club, which we're going to get. But yeah, I mean, and if a weapon has a special effect, like a poison or a frostbite or something, that can be really fun, and I like using that. And yeah, it's a bit like Mega Man using the special weapons, and I'm always a bit sad when I discover that this or that special weapon is actually kind of subpar. I should probably heal up, but anyway, I want to stop anyway. But but yeah, getting boss powers. I mean, it's not natural. In Dark Souls 1, to get a boss power, you have to get the boss soul. Not every boss drops a soul. In Dark Souls 3, every boss drops a soul. And you have to get a weapon to +10 first, for which you need an extra ember, which you can give to blacksmith. And when the weapon is +10, using a lot of upgrade materials and souls, then you go to a different blacksmith, which is halfway through the game. And then after you've done that, you can finally make your +10 weapon a boss weapon. Then it sucks. I mean, half of them are garbage for one reason or another. That's kind of sad. Played around with some of them. I still have to try some others, but you know. About the weapons, just going to show you one more or two. If I say like the axe is maybe a little too slow and a little too boring because it just slashes, you know, and it smashes a bit, but it's just one enemy in front, maybe two if they're close to each other, then I can try a different weapon. I cannot carry a single one of them except for the broken straight sword because I have no dexterity, but I can still show you what it looks like. In Dark Souls 1, I could have done this too, not for strength, but yeah, I said that the broadsword is one of the best weapons in the game, and this is why. Slash, 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 slash. This is really fast, this is really effective, and the damage will stay good if you upgrade this weapon until the very end of the game. Something which is it's cool. It's like using the Buster in Mega Man. I hate this, so I'm never using straight swords. What is also fun about this sword though is with the R2, you have this running thing. I didn't actually know this because I've never used this, which can be a very nice distance close. If the enemy jumps away from you, say, fuck this, you're staying here. And what you can also do, especially with this shield, which allows the use of weapon arts, is hold L2 and you go into this stance here, and then if you hit R1, the light attack, you do this, which knocks away enemy shields, which is perfect if the enemy has a shield. So you have a utility function in this weapon, you know. It's fun to play around with that and find the best approach for a situation. And what you can do if you use R2 is this, which is a little stronger and takes a little more time, and you should think about when using it. So basically, you have a tool here, which is just, this is your basic attack, this is your needle cannon. You have this here, which is your top spin, let's say it like this, because it is more melee focused and it gets you closer to the enemies. And then you have this, which gets away the enemy's shield quick, which is a crash bomb. And then you have this, which is a little stronger but a little harder to use and a little slower. And this is your black hole bomb. I don't know. All in one weapon. But this kind of moveset difference, this utility is also something which I find very attractive, and which again I like. You can kind of compare it to Mega Man. I mean, you don't have to compare it to Mega Man just because I like playing Mega Man games and I've analyzed them before. But the same principles of analysis in how a Mega Man games work, and why I like Mega Man games and why I like thinking about Mega Man games is yeah, exactly. It's terrible for bosses. You never have to break a boss's shield like this. It's and it's really slow and stuff. But it might be useful once in a while. But yeah, I mean, thinking about game design is very similar between games, because usually games have the simple principle of they want to entertain the player and they want to be beatable in some way, and there is a lot of ways in which you can make this fun and engaging for the player and not the total chore to play, basically. And yeah, with this very cookie cutter observation, we're going to finish the stream for tonight. I thank you very, very much for engaging with me, for talking to me, for making this a success in my books, because I really had fun to do this, and I actually had someone listening to me ramble on. I'm now going to look at how the recording turns out. Um, in the end, maybe it's terrible. Maybe I forgot to turn on. I don't think I forgot to turn it on. I turn it off now. And I will stop the stream now. And thank you very much for your attention.